Did you just call me an idiot?
By ideological.
Idiot logical. That's the kind of logic I use.
Kind of mean. It's time to war, Max.
What's up, Gen Z? We're trying to relate to you a little bit. We're just putting a different word on the front end of Max and calling it a thing now. That's where we've gotten to in culture, David.
We're Gen Z maxing.
We got Gen Z maxing. If you can't tell, David has been nicotine maxing all day.
Let's go.
He's this way. No, you've been hard at work on another project that we're working on, and I don't know if you're ready to announce it, but it's very exciting. We're really stoked to get it out there.
I teased it on my personal stuff. I haven't dropped the websites. It all says coming soon, but we're coming soon. If you know what I'm saying.
Sooning hard over here.
But yeah, we're working long hours to get that all up and going, and but I made some time to make sure that we could knock this out. On top of my long hours, this week, I had a lot of people that I've known for a very long time in the political world just get into conversations about the war. And, some watch podcasts, some don't, all that kind of stuff. But they know without talking to me where I'm probably going to be at on this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So these things kind of came out, and we started talking back and forth, and you were on some of those threads. And I was like, it's a difficult thing to navigate. I understand that. And I want to try to, so I was hoping my goal here was to try to lay out my case more systemically, because I've only been really because I didn't know what was going on. That's the hardest part about it. And this was hard back in the day, but it's even harder now, because when a war kind of drifts for a while, you start to get a better understanding of it. But when it's happening quickly or when it's fresh, the information environment's so much harder to navigate.
Right. You got the fog of war effect kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm. So I kind of built this thinking, well, man, how do I try to build something a little more systemic and less narrow? Because what I've been saying is I think this is what we're actually about, right? Because what our ostensible causes don't seem possible, but that kind of ignored the larger strategic questions. So that's what I want to talk about today, is get into that larger tactical versus strategic questions. And so we can hopefully build a better mental model about what the decision-making framework that the Trump administration has to be facing at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Well, before we get into that stuff, and there's plenty to talk about there, where do we find ourselves at this moment in time regarding the war in Iran?
Right. Yeah. You have to establish the backdrop. What has it been? I mean, because it was kind of surprising to me. We sat down to record this, and I was like, wait a minute. How long have we been at war? Because it doesn't feel like it's been very long, but it's been 21 days.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It does not feel like 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm. And we're coming up. I mean, they said 4 to 5 weeks was the initial estimate. Now, immediately, other people were like, come on, and there was some different, the Israelis were like, yeah, probably not.
I don't even think 4 to 5 weeks was the initial estimate. I think it was shorter than that. They were like, it's going to be over in a few days. Yeah. And then it was like, definitely going to be at least a couple weeks, definitely going to be at least 4 to 6 weeks. It's reminiscent for some of us to the 2 weeks to flatten the curve situation during COVID.
Yeah, or the Iraq war invasion was going to be real quick.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So we're sitting with 21 days, coming up on the 4 to 5 weeks. We're now at 13 of American soldiers dead, tragically. 200 are injured, mostly minor, but there are some major injuries. About 20 of them or to 10 of them are major injuries. Obviously, these are all estimates because the DOD exists to lie to us.
DOW, sorry.
DOW.
Department of War.
Dow.
It's
just confusing now. Yeah. Anyways, the Iranians, they are now at 1,444 killed.
Wow.
With 18,000 to 19,000 wounded.
And are those all presumed combatants, or are there civilians mixed into that number?
The Iranians are not releasing that, it appears. Those are not numbers that I was able to separate. I asked Grok if it had a good separation. Didn't have a good one. So it generated estimates that other people had done on that, but from the official Iranian sources, it's not that. Yeah. And obviously those might be understated as well, so you got to keep that in mind.
Sure.
Israel, 22 killed. They have a bunch injured as well, a couple thousand injured. U.S. has spent 550. Well, I mean, let's look at the numbers as they click in.
Oh, geez.
At this handy dandy Iran-cost-ticker.com. This is a good design, though. Doesn't it look pretty?
It's got a very monitoring the situation vibe to it.
Yes, it does. Live estimate. Operation Epic Theory.
$25 billion and counting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, 11.3 billion in the first 6 days, and 1 billion a day ongoing.
It's counting the days different than everyone else did.
That is interesting. It only puts us at 19 days instead of 21.
That's weird.
That's crazy. So $11,574 per second.
Oh, I know what I did. I put it as 21 because assuming the podcast would come out.
Oh,
I'm an idiot.
When you watch this,
it'll be 20 or 21 days.
Right.
Wow, David. See, that's the hours. That's the hours talking.
That's right.
My bad.
He did not get outside and touch grass today.
Not at all.
He only got consumed by the internet and the computer.
Pale. Yeah, we're spending $11,000 per second, $41 million per hour, and $1 billion a day.
41,666,667, which is just rounded up. It's a very evil amount of money to spend per day.
It's the war. Wars are devils. All right, the human cost, 13 soldiers skilled, 5,000. Wow, this is way higher.
That is much higher. I wonder. Obviously, this is sort of that fog of war effect, right?
Yes.
Like you're going to get different numbers from every source. Wow. We're kind of just going with the most conservative ones. It seems like
that's kind of what I was shot for.
Yeah.
Because all the stuff I look for always gave a range, and I always just pick the bottom of the range just to be consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on top of the spending, it looks like, at least based on what we could find, that the U.S. has spent about $500 million or lost $500 million in aircraft. Mm-hmm. There was an F-35 that was shot at and damaged, I believe, not downed completely today, which was supposed to be like completely invisible to radar. It's supposed to be like our silver bullet jet. And as you might remember, this is the one that got lost in the rain, I believe it was, somewhere in the U.S. on a training mission.
Yeah. Do you remember the story? We covered it like 2 years ago, and it was they accidentally ejected.
Yes.
And the autopilot just
kept going.
Flew off.
Just disappeared.
Over the horizon.
Yeah, for sure. And this, I mean, I read some stuff on X today, unconfirmed, but from what I'm understanding, it's supposed to be highly shielded to radar, right, as all of our stealth aircraft are. But this one, because it has so much propulsion, it runs really hot, and it shows up very hot on infrared. So assuming that Iran and perhaps China or Russia and the technology that they're giving to Iran have the ability to see infrared, be tracking the skies with this technology, it may not be as stealth as we think. But a bit of an aside there. Also lost a KC-135 refueling tanker and 12 MQ-9 Reaper drones.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how much those cost each, but somehow that all totals up to about $500 million.
They ain't cheap. We know that.
They ain't cheap. They're not. It's not a DJI Mavic we're talking about here, people. God, would it be cool if you could own an MQ-9?
That's a big drone, dude.
That's the real like ultimate case.
The size of my car
for the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
MQ-9. That's the end.
If I can't own an MQ-9, this is tyranny.
Exactly. Oh gosh. And then an estimated 1.5 to 2.5 billion in damages to 17 U.S. bases across the region.
Man, yeah, that's a lot of money. In the damages to the bases, and that includes like radio installations and things like that we believe are struck.
Yeah.
But obviously, all of these are probably conservative. It's actually probably far worse. If you had any classified vehicles that were damaged in a way, we wouldn't know about them. And we also have oil prices, which were around $50 to $73 per barrel. So the economic cost is that those are now bouncing between 110 and 119. It's briefly at 120, but it's now down to 100 to 108. We're still up about 40 to 50% on oil. And that means every time you're going to the gas, that's just that it's much more expensive now.
Well, it is. And we see it at the pump a lot sooner than we see it in goods and services, right? As diesel goes up, that is going to start trickling through all consumer goods prices because everything that we buy is transited to you by a train that is run actually electrically. I didn't know this till recently, but with a diesel generator or obviously semi-trucks. So that stuff is going to be coming if this doesn't change.
Yeah, and it's even worse, right? If the Strait of Hormuz continues to be controlled by Iran, that it will, that's 1/3 of all fertilizer.
Right.
fertilizer precursors, rather.
Right, nitrogen specifically, I've been reading.
Yeah, so with that, planting season, crop yields are lower, potentially, or at least more expensive going in. Resourcing them from other places are going to be more expensive. Like all kinds of challenges are going to happen from that.
And there's not a long timeline to correct that supply chain malfunction because planting season is coming up. Right, we're coming into spring. We may have months or less to figure that part out.
Yep. And so the economic cost is already not just priced in, it's going to get far worse, 100%. And then we are stuck at about 500 oil takers, and hundreds of container ships are trapped or rerouted through the Cape Good Hope instead of the Suez or Strait of Hormuz. Shipping rates at that point are going to surcharge up 15 to 30%. LNG spot prices doubled in Asia. Europe, natural gas prices nearly doubled initially from the start of the war.
Right.
So imagine, and now we're not going to winter in Europe, so that's nice, right? If it is over by winter, that's going to be a really good thing for Europe because they already are under the pinch from Russian natural gas being shut off. So then they have Russian and Middle Eastern natural gas. That's a crunch.
That is.
Yeah. Being poor in Europe would suck.
Well, and does that have an effect on us, right? Because, I mean, we have LNG exports, and as I understand, they're running at basically maximum capacity to try to meet the demand out there that can't be met by the supply from the Middle East. So that's obviously going to have an upward effect on our energy prices as well.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump actually said this the other day. It was like, well, our oil company's going to make a lot of money,
Yeah,
and that's true
on us.
Yeah, but the trick is it's a global market, right? So I imagine oil is a little more fungible. Natural gas could be a little more difficult because you got to like pump it into a tank and then put it on an oil tanker and move it across. And how much of that is, I mean, it's hard to know. Yeah. But we've had oil shocks before, but LNG shocks like this on this scale might be more unique. So I'm very curious how that's going to shake.
For sure.
Don't really know.
Where's the Dow right now? Is it still over 50,000?
I don't know. Can we talk about Epstein?
Yeah, right. Are we allowed to go back to that yet?
Let's find out. Did I search it wrong?
Yeah, that's the company Dow, not the Dow index.
Dow
we need
index.
the index. We're way
under 50,000.
below.
Oh man, we only talk about Epstein for like a day. I guess we're talking about him.
No, we can't.
Well, we can talk about it. That's right.
We can't talk about it when it's over 50,000. So we are in the clear, people. We can talk about Epstein again. Okay. Look forward to that in the next episode.
No, we're not talking about Epstein anymore. Everyone's tired of it.
No, everyone's talking about Palm Beach Pete.
Yes.
The Epstein lookalike that was spotted in Florida. We're not going into that.
Talk about the real shit.
Yeah.
All right. So first up, in terms of the question is should you support this war? Always starts with the casus belli.
Which is what?
The cause of the war.
Sure.
The original, like what is the motive for entering the war? Is it just or not?
Yep.
Right. So we have today, Joe has volunteered to be bi-ideological.
Voluntold, really, actually.
You're going to steel man the administration here, like
sure.
all the reasons that we've seen people use to justify entry to the war.
For sure.
And I'll try my best to represent the other side and let you, dear listener, make up your own mind.
And I just want to disclaim my ability to do this. I think I know. I understand enough about their views and perspective. Do an okay job, but I don't hold these views, so it might be a challenge. I just want to say that
you're gonna do fine, Joe.
Okay,
you're good. Just do it with a silly voice all the time.
Which one?
I don't know.
They were gonna get nukes. Okay, we knew they were gonna get nukes. We have very good intelligence from our allies in the region, Israel.
Yeah. Well.
Were they going to get nukes? They were going to get nukes. That's the reason we went in. Right?
They're going to get nukes.
That's been the whole thing. They were going to get nukes.
Weapons of mass destruction, as usual.
Yes.
Yep. So this relies on the conflation between two things: enrichment and nukes. Enrichment of uranium can be used for many things. Research reactors. It can be used for all kinds of things in medical sciences to electromagnetic sciences to energy. Right. The strategy for Iran for a very long time has been to use their electricity, not to use, oil to export the oil and use nuclear energy, which we gave them in the Atoms for Peace program in the 1950s. Yeah. So they have this power in the first place because we gave it to them. they use that for their electricity, but they've always had a latent nuclear ability, meaning that if they wanted to, they could try to develop a nuclear weapon because they already have the science and technology to do that. So conflating the latent nuclear bomb with having a nuclear bomb are two different things. And from the interest point of view of America, it's what is the thing that with the minimum amount of cost will get you to the thing that you want, that doesn't expose you for actual immediate interests, right? We have an actual immediate interest in China, for example, right? If China wants to conquer Japan or something like that, right? Or take over Taiwan or all these other things. Those are more immediate because if Iran develops a nuke, that doesn't really constrain us too much, right?
Us being the U.S.
The U.S. It would be very dangerous for the regional ambitions of Israel.
Our greatest ally.
Our ally Israel. So the enrichment conflation is the core problem there. And really where you get that is when you listen to Witkoff talk. He doesn't distinguish between the two. And he says that he was instructed by Trump to basically make that the standard. No deal unless they completely get rid of enrichment. And of course that runs into the typical trap we've discussed on this podcast before, which is that Libya did that deal. And then the leader of Libya, Gaddafi, died at the end of a bayonet to his butthole. So,
that will end up on the stream deck.
Yeah.
Sure.
So next to that, and it's important to remember too, even if you don't like international law, the reality is the Constitution requires us to respect it because it's a treaty that we signed. And so if you believe in a country that has integrity, you have to obey by your word, by your contract, by the things you sign. And the thing we signed back in the 1940s and 50s said that every country that gains the ability to enrich has the right to enrich as long as they don't use it for weapons. So making enrichment the same as developing a nuclear weapon, which are two different concepts, itself is a violation of our own deal that we cut with the world that created the IAEA and all the inspection regime and all the anti-nuclear proliferation agreements and arrangements that we tried to set up that have largely been successful, have had problems and failures like Pakistan and whatnot, but for the most part have prevented this from happening in the past.
But David, the inspection regime is one thing, right? But they could easily be developing nuclear weapons underground, as we seem to know that they are. Mm-hmm. And they could be doing that outside of the inspection regime. They could be doing it in secret. They don't have to tell us everything, and we shouldn't probably trust that they are. They're not friendly to us.
Yeah, the question is like how much risk tolerance you have to the potential downsides, right? So if the potential downside is the entirety of the Strait of Hormuz being shut down, or controlled by Iran for 3 years, I mean, that's a potential outlay, right? If you say, oh, we can just get out, is it just hold on towards the end and we'll get through the actual end war scenarios systemically. But if your risk tolerance is really high, you're like, well, wait a minute. There's actually a lot at stake in going to war here over something we have no intelligence to believe that's happening. In fact, that's exactly what the DNI said yesterday. Well, not actually yesterday, but right before she got into office, that they were at best 1 year to 6 months technologically from getting to a nuclear weapon. 2, they don't have the delivery capable vehicle of delivering one. You can't just slap a nuclear weapon onto a regular ballistic missile. You have to have a different kind of ballistic missile to do it. You have to have a ballistic missile designed for it. Second, you have to test it. People tend to undervalue how much testing we did to develop nuclear weapons. We did all these test bombs, not because we just really like blowing shit up, although it's kind of cool. We did that because it's difficult to know that your theoreticals are going to turn into an actual bomb. That's why that's why so many bombs fail, honestly, because they're complicated machinery. And they're not experienced nuclear weapon makers, right? Second, and then additionally that we don't have any reason to believe that they have made that decision according to the DNI before she took office. Now, even yesterday, she didn't say that they had at no point in her testimony yesterday did she say that I was able to find. I didn't get to watch the whole thing, so please forgive me. But in everything I looked about it, she did not say they had decided to make a nuclear weapon. In fact, one of the Democrat congressmen pushed her really hard on it. She was like, is this an imminent threat? And she said, only the president can decide if it was an imminent threat. Do you think if they had the intel, she wouldn't have said, yes, we had the intel? I mean, come on. She has her entire reputation on the line. It's very hard to believe that. So they had never made the decision to. They had her 2 religious dictates saying they wouldn't. They had multiple agreements, including the IAEA, which Israel is not subject to, but Iran is, and the JCPOA, all saying that they were not going to build nukes and monitoring that with inspectors on the ground 24/7 and live camera feeds to all their facilities. And we literally had, that was actually funny because in the nuclear negotiation deal that was happening during Obama, every piece of nuclear material was like chartered. So unless they had one prior to like 2002, maybe then. And a couple episodes ago, maybe like a dozen or something like that, I actually went through the JCPOA.
What is that?
That's the Joint Cooperation Plan of Agreement set up under Obama. It's basically the Iran-U.S. multilateral negotiation on nuclear technology and nuclear weapons with Iran. Mm-hmm. In that, there were complaints, but the complaints were like, back in 2002, this amount was not accounted for. None of this stuff was recent, even to the time frame of the JCPOA. So even if there was one, it would be a very, very small amount. But we have no evidence of that otherwise. Yeah. And they were generally compliant with the IAEA. That's also true. Like the things that they had with our problem with the IAEA were relatively minor.
But David, they attacked us in 1979.
Yeah.
This war has been going on for 5 decades.
They've actually been at war with us, according to the new Homeland Security Director. Well, yet to be confirmed. The guy, punch him up, Senator, that guy? Yeah. Senator Punch him up. That's what I like to call him.
Who is that?
Pew, pew. He's like the guy from Ohio. He wanted to, remember we did the thing, he wanted to fight the Teamster guy?
Oh, like the Mark Wayne Mullen?
Yeah, that guy. He's the new Homeland Security Director.
Right.
Well, at least appointed by Trump.
Sure. I think he's in confirmation hearings now.
Yes, yeah. Anyways, sorry, I was trying to make a joke. Okay, so 1979 is an interesting time period because, this is the Iranian Revolution, right? This is after Operation Ajax in 1953. So how much these are connected, I get that there's a lot of shorthanding that happens in this. It is a large period of time between 53 and 79. But keep in mind, how much anxiety our country still feels about 9/11. How much, people would feel about another country using your own constitution to reinstall your monarchy when you thought you were going to get a democratically elected government. And then second, it does underestimate a little bit, like the questioning of Operation Ajax as being important, just how bad the Shah was. The Shah had a lot of great sides to it, too. He was westernizing them. He had all kinds of modern liberalism built in, but he also had torture chambers and like real brutal crackdowns on protesters. In fact, one of the biggest talking points right now that's going around is really this is all Jimmy Carter's fault because Jimmy Carter told the Shah that he should respect human rights in the 1979 revolution and not crack down on the protesters. The same people, to be clear, the same people are saying that the current Iranian regime was so bad, and they are terrible, but I'm just saying that they're making a big deal out of all the protesters who died this last year. They said, well, that with hindsight being 2020, of course, that the Shah should have cracked down harder on his protests. But at the time, they didn't. The U.S. State Department and the Shah didn't know how bad it was going to be until before you know it, they had the Iranian Revolution. So, and then there was blowback against us with they took it out on us partially by capturing or taking hostages of some of our people.
In the embassy?
In the embassy, and then there was the
Olympic team, I believe.
Olympic team, yeah. So, but this is where our term blowback came from, is because after 1953, before 1979, the CIA very presciently said, hey, we did this thing. We helped reinstall the Shah. From this, what they felt like, and there's good reason to believe that it was kind of a communist thing, although there is disagreement about whether or not Mossadegh, the guy who was replacing the Shah, was going to nationalize or just using nationalization to renegotiate the rate of return that they were getting for British Petroleum taking oil out of their land.
Right.
So if you're negotiating with the former global hegemon, who has the new global hegemon in their back pocket, apparently, because that's what we did at the time, you might come in strong and maybe you came in too strong. But even then, the CIA at the time was like, well, maybe there's going to be unintended consequences of that. And we've been paying the unintended consequences for a long time. So, and then the second to that, There's a really important, you got to check out in Scott Horton's book, Enough Already. He has a section on Iran specifically about how Iran in the late 80s was actually friends with Israel. That they had a whole time period there, a couple years, where they were working together all the time. In fact, Iran-Contra was selling Israeli weapons to Iran. So that we could fund the Contras in South America, right? So it's not as if this country isn't something that can be friendly to other countries. Is that this whole model of they're just at war with us because they're Muslim or because they're crazy 12ers or whatever? That just isn't rational when you look at the entire history. They've dealt with other countries peacefully in the past.
What's a 12er?
It's a particular religious dogmatism of some Shia Muslims about the 12th Imam's going to come back and take over the world and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
And a lot of Americans who really like to hit on Islam will focus really heavily there. And there's legitimate reasons there. There are radical 12ers. I'm not disagreeing with that. It just kind of can be overemphasized in lieu of the very real political things that actually give you a clear motive that you can understand as another human being, look at another human being. Right. How would you feel if your country was overthrown and all that kind of stuff?
Right, for sure. Well, but David, they attacked our troops in Iraq.
Yeah, and also in Enough Already, he casts, there's a lot of reasons that this has been weaponized, to understand that this has been a bit weaponized by people. Now, it is true that Shia militias had, some had relationships with Iran. It makes a lot of sense. You're in Shia-stan, right? Sorry for another history lesson, but please bear with me. In 1913, after World War I, we break up all these countries and we take the Ottoman Empire, we break it up in all these different countries and we say, you're now in this shape. I don't care what your ethnic majorities are. I don't care about what the will of the people is. All of our Western Lockean concepts of the just consent of the governed makes the best government, that was out the window. Because the problem with that is because you can go get coherence. And once you have coherence as a nation state, you can then build power. So in order to prevent coherence, we slice Shia-stan in half. We cut the Kurds into 4 different states and all these, problems that are generated out of this giant central plan that was and how we were going to take the carcass of the Ottoman Empire and turn it into something else that could never threaten us again in the West. That is the root cause of so much of this.
It's ironic because it has been pretty threatening to us in the West since then.
Yeah.
Or at least they've made it seem as such.
Well, it's threatening in the asymmetric way, right? And it shows the hubris of central planning.
Yeah.
Right? Central planning assumes that you have the knowledge to be able to design the future. And the insight, the core insight that conservatives and libertarians have made for a very long time is that you can't. It's not possible to. It wasn't until Buckley came along in the 50s and said, well, we have to, so we're all socialists now when it comes to foreign policy. And for some reason, that's how so many conservatives have now become. But the old right didn't believe that at all. Our intellectual forefathers did not believe that. They thought that you couldn't plan the economy and you couldn't plan the central security of the world. So anyways, to return back to this whole question of Shia militias, yes, some definitely had relationships, but the Shia militias had a complex set of motivations, actually. Some religious, some were more localized to a particular town. Some were more regional, like alliances with Iran or the IRGC and had direct connections. But many others were nationalists who wanted an Iran and were actually on our side at different points in these fights. So every time there was a roadside bomb, the Warhawks would say that was from Iran. But then reporters came in and they found all these roadside bomb manufacturing centers, in basements in Iraq, made with parts from all over the region. So there wasn't any it kind of got reported as if Iran was sneaking in bombs, but it was actually homemade manufactured bombs there. And there's the case that this was all Iranian is actually relatively weak. That would be the softest way I could put it. The hardest way I put it, and Scott actually goes there with this, is that for the most part, these guys weren't actually centrally coordinated by Iran at all. Perhaps some individuals were, had training with the RGC, but we're not talking about where you can attribute all the deaths from roadside bombs from Shia militias to Iran. That is propaganda.
Got it.
Yeah, and this happened, this is a habit during the GWOT. It happened all the time, where anytime something bad happened, it was just, Iran. Right. And you can imagine why if you've been following the podcast for a while. Clean baked memo, fifth country in 5 years, that's our seventh country in 5 years sort of thing, right? Iran was always on the list, you know? So you could if you knew the pieces, you can see them kind of trying to advocate for arranging the board.
Well, you could see why, because they say death to America all the time, right? I mean, isn't that something?
Yeah, I mean, there's something to it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not a nice thing to say about anybody. And I, as an American and as a young man, bought that line. You know, when I was in the early 2000s, when I was in the middle of the GWAT, was very supportive of it. It really wasn't until about 2008 that I finally had my eyes opened.
What opened your eyes?
Ron Paul. Ron Paul was in front of the South Carolina Republicans doing a debate, and I was very, I'm still a spiritual person. I believe in God, but I have, but I'm not where I was then. I was a religious person then, in a much more dogmatic way, and like I was very much into scripture. And he got up in front of these guys and he said, we should treat other people the way we want to be treated. He said the golden rule. He quoted scripture to the South Carolina Republicans, and he was booed, right? And I was, Tucker Carlson just interviewed him, Huckabee guy at the time. And I'm here and sitting there, I just remember watching it and just being like, looking around my empty room, be like, what just happened? That was the most obvious thing I could imagine. And that was the first knock at the door. And then the financial crisis happened and everything else. And I was like, found Austrian business cycle theory, worked my way back around to Ron Paul and went on from there.
Yeah.
So death in America, what does it mean? It's like if you, it is a direct translation, but what does it mean culturally? Like if I said, screw you, man, I could really be saying, technically I could be saying, I'm going to, let's
unalive you.
Yeah. Or let's have sex, like I could be saying, yeah, right.
I hope you're not saying that.
Yeah. F you. I could be saying, yeah, get out of here. I don't like you. Or I could be saying, I'm going to rape you. That I don't think it's the latter too often, right?
Yeah.
And we're kind of interpreting death to America as if it were the latter only. And in Farsi, it's a little more complicated. It's a little bit closer to that. If you're walking through you're walking through your house in the middle of the night and you stub your toe on the ottoman, you would say, death to the Ottomans,
Nice.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It would be closer to that, and then it would be how we're thinking about it, which is like a actual threat.
Right.
And then second to that, like, you got to keep in mind that it was in their backyard in Shiistan, Iraq, that 1 million people died during the War on Terror. That Syria became the basket case that it is, and all the refugee crisis. That Libya happened, that all these other places happened.
Yemen.
The Houthis. Mm-hmm. The Houthis were the biggest. I mean, what was happening in the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula before the war in Ukraine was the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world. It's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of deaths. For what? In that civil war. So, and these guys kind of see everything that Israel does, everything that we do, everything that Saudi does is one big group. It's kind of understandable because we kind of put ourselves we kind of tied ourselves to their boats. So yeah, we get wrapped in with a lot of the bad stuff they do. So every time, something bad happens in Lebanon or something bad happens in Gaza, it's tied to us now. And that sucks. I don't want to be tied to, I don't want that to be on us.
Yeah.
But that's what the decision that our government has made. So when they say death in America, do they mean the Americans? Do they mean the American government? Do they mean the policies that America has implemented? It's all those things. But they've consistently said not Americans, but rather our government. But that doesn't mean they could be lying. Like, I'm open to that. Yet I have to keep in mind that it might not mean exactly what it appears to mean.
That's fair.
And it's in the second of that, is not being liked by a country a good enough reason to go murder people? You know what I mean? Like as soon as you get a little bit of the context of what we've been doing in the Middle East, pulling off a 9/11 every month for a couple decades worth of deaths, is it okay at some point for just to accept the fact that some people aren't going to like us, and maybe that doesn't mean we can go to war with them justly because of the decisions other administrations made? I don't think so. I don't think it's a good enough call.
Yeah. Well, what about the fact that they had an opportunity to make a deal and they chose not to?
And this goes to the enrichment question. Like, if you set the standard too high on the deal and you can't reach a deal, right? I mean, Trump had a choice. He could have just said 2 months ago, he could have just said, okay, you can enrich, but we're going to monitor everything. And whatever the monitoring regime of the JCPOA was, we're going to double it. We're going to triple it. We're going to quadruple it. What do you think of that? Oh, we won't quadruple it, but we'll double it? Okay, good. Deal. That's the art of the deal. Is the art of the deal blowing people up? Is that in the book? Can someone tell me that? Because it seems like the deal has to be you ask high, you insist on high, and you find a compromise. That's what a deal is.
Yeah, generally speaking.
So, and then the other parts of the deal, funding of proxy sources of proxies. Well, it's kind of something that everyone does. We fund proxy sources all the time. So does Israel.
Sure.
Maybe HTS is. Did we fund HTS? That was the group that took over Syria.
Oh yeah.
A lot of former ISIS. So, but those forces aren't a problem for us. So why are we cutting a deal to make Israel's life better, per se? At least to the point where we set such a high standard on that deal that we are now going to risk crashing the American economy and all the collateral consequences of that, not to secure our future, but to secure an easier road for regional hegemony for Israel. And that would be my question. Is that a good enough cause to go to war? That the deal was set maybe too high, and then you're going to war now because they refused.
Well, I mean, I think it could be said that there are some of those crazy radicals you were talking about that would refuse to cut a deal. So,
well, unfortunately, those weren't the people we were talking to. At the time, what we were talking to were the moderates who wanted a deal, but then we murdered them all. So now where do we get the deal? Is the question. Like, if you're in a negotiation and then you murder all of them, the next people who come are going to be a little less willing to deal, right? And then we murdered that group. So now we're on the third group, and who's going to cut the deal with? And what are the terms going to be? Especially when they have now an entrenched asymmetric warfare approach potentially for the entire northern part of the Strait of Hormuz, and therefore cutting off 1/3 of all the fertilizer and 20% of the oil coming out of that region.
Yeah. Yep. But they killed all those protesters. What, almost 500,000 protesters?
Yeah, that's what I wrote. Yeah, so I was pretty skeptical when the numbers first came out, because the first numbers came out really quick. And when numbers come out really quick, you should be skeptical. I also couldn't find any numbers that weren't coming from something that was funded by the USAID or one of NED or one of its proxy groups. And it's not that they're going to necessarily lie to you, but you should always be careful because it's kind of like asking an arson how the fire's going. They're always going to tell you it's going great, right? They're always going to tell you what suits their books.
Sure.
So originally, some of the actual estimates out here were 30,000. It turned out that was an order of magnitude off. It's closer to 3,000. There's still a lot of protesters, right? No doubt. It's terrible government. I hate the Iranian government. I hate all governments, guys. They're all bad. I don't know why. That's actually something that bothers me is people who feel like they have to put out a disclaimer. I don't like Iran. Well, yeah, of course I don't like Iran. Like, do we have to clarify that? But yeah, this it's closer to 3,000 protesters. That's terrible. But how do we kill people to save people? Is our new standard anytime a government kills its own people that we have to get involved in it at all times? We didn't get involved in Azerbaijan's war till the very end, right after it killed a bunch of its own people. And we keep creating conditions for governments to kill their own people. I mean, the protests happened in the first place because of the sanctions regime. If we had just kept the JCPOA, those people would have never died. Probably because there wouldn't have been the sanctions, so they wouldn't have had the protests in the first place because the protests were about the sanctions, right? And they turned into maybe government protests. And then lastly, there were a lot of interesting reports out of Iran. This could be counterintelligence. I don't know. It could be misinformation from the Iranian government. It is interesting, though, that there were a lot of attacks on fire stations and police stations and things like that with rifles and shooting of cops at these protests. And that might indicate either one, they're better armed than we thought that the populace of Iran was, or two, and there was a more systemic effort, perhaps by an intelligence agency, because there are all these things called color revolutions. We've done them many times before, and it kind of followed a pretty similar pattern of taking what was organic and kind of co-opting it and driving into a very violent direction, creating a response so that then you can overthrow that government. So it is possible the CIA and Mossad had something to do with it in the first place. In which case, we don't know that, but I can always speculate because this is top secret stuff, and we don't do anything. We don't do foreign policy overtly, as a republic should. In a republic, then you can have opinions about stuff because you can know things. But because we have the CIA and everything is done in the dark, we're left to speculate. And then they can turn that around and use it as a justification to go to war. Like, just imagine for a second, if the CIA and Mossad were involved in this from the very beginning and turning those protests violent, and then we use that to get into war. Imagine the amount of power we're giving that organization to bring us into a war that we necessarily might not have got involved in if it wasn't for that. And involved for the best reasons, right? That's like the night watchman reason. That's like the reason to protect innocence, right? It's not like a jaded, geopolitical reason. It's to protect people. And then Americans want to see themselves that way. But if that's a lie, because we had people on the ground stirring that or shooting cops in Iran as agents, assets, that's a whole different deal.
Yeah, it is. Is the war legal, David? What do you think?
Well, the typical argument I've heard so far is either Obama did it or Jefferson did it, which is a big spectrum.
Oh, wow. Yeah. A couple of years passed between those two.
Obama did illegal wars, so I get to do illegal wars. And I'm just that's a terrible standard for a Republican. Because, I don't think the authorization to use of military force to go after Al-Qaeda should work where we go after groups that were fighting Al-Qaeda in Syria. Right? Where Assad was on our side against Al-Qaeda, to be clear. And then Obama went to war against Assad through covert means in a air warfare campaign and stuff like that. Right? Mm-hmm. So that was illegal. This doesn't have the same texture, but it's virtually the same thing in the sense that we're going to war without a clear authorization to use of military force. Constitutionally, they're similar. The other one is Jefferson, and Jefferson is always putting out as with the Barbary Pirates. But people tend to forget that he was actually there in the first place to conduct the Barbary Pirates War under an authorization to use of military force. So that was called the, quote, Act for the Protection of the Commerce of Seamen in the United States against the Tripoli Crusaders. Cruisers. Yeah, sorry. Not Crusaders. That'd be weird because they're Muslims.
That would be weird.
Yeah. So what happened in that story, Joe, is Jefferson gets the authorization from Congress. Ships go over there. They were just supposed to protect the area, but they end up conquering it.
Whoops.
And then coming home, and Congress was like, whoops. And then they passed an authorization to say it was legal after the fact.
At least they, did that afterwards. Actually, you know what? We're cool with this. Go for it.
So that is nothing like the president, without any move from Congress other than informing the Gang of Eight that they are going to do this. That's not the same. These aren't analogies. It's terrible argument by analogy.
Well, and there's no representation involved in that situation.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the other kind of breed of that is it's not a war, and that's what the speaker
right. It's an excursion.
Yeah, that's what the Donald Trump said. He's like, I don't want to do this. Call it excursion.
It's an excursion. Great vehicle made by Ford, very large, very beautiful, made in America,
great American company. So it's not a war is also an interesting one because it's not a war unless you declare it. So we're now stuck at a very particular question between war-making powers. The president is the commander-in-chief, right? And this kind of gets into is the War Powers Act constitutional? Because that's what they're saying is, he's operating under the war powers, not the Constitution. But that's not how statute works. The Constitution gives statute its legitimacy. That's how it works. You established a original compact between the states that create the federal government, say, these are the rules. And then the rules then inform the statute. That's how a republic works. That's how Republicans should defend the republic. And Madison made this clear. Article 2 says the president is the commander-in-chief. that doesn't mean he can just do whatever he wants with the military at all times, because it put in Article 1 that Congress has the war-making powers. Madison, in the Federalist Papers, made this clear in that he said Congress decides when force can be used and the president conducts the use of force. This is a classic Roman architecture to thinking about this, because you don't want more than one chef in the kitchen in conducting a war. So you don't want the Senate involved in that, but you do want the consent of the governed for when you go to war. And the fact that good Republicans are confusing this right now is so irritating to me, because it's so clear in the Constitution. And so in the 1950s, they came along, 60s, they came along and they said, well, the argument was this, Joe. We have airplanes now. So therefore, the Constitution's outdated, and we need to pass a law to clarify that Article 2 means he can do anything he wants for 90 days, but then he has to go to Congress.
Because airplanes?
Because airplanes and subs.
Right.
And submarines, intercontinental ballistic missiles, all those things. So that
I'm struggling to find any coherence to that argument at all.
Well, so the argument is this, and I'll steel man it real quick.
Sure.
The argument is, if Russia launches intercontinental ballistic missiles, the president doesn't have to convene in Congress to pass something so that he can launch them back. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay, that's the steel man. This has nothing to do with intercontinental ballistic. That would be an imminent threat.
Would also be a defensive move too.
Yeah. Right. So like, you could pass an authorization of use of military force that says forevermore, if intercontinental ballistic missiles are on their way to Washington or any place in the mainland United States, the president is allowed to attack back, deter with use of force. That's all you would have to do. But what they did is they passed statute that overrode the constitutional structure, and that is unconstitutional. Because conservatives believe in originalism. Originalism is the method of interpreting the Constitution that says, what did it mean at the time when we signed it? Because it's a contract. Contracts can't change based upon our loosey-goosey readings of it. And for some reason, Republicans are now like, what is a war? What is a woman? And they're also like, the Constitution's a living, breathing document that doesn't really mean anything unless I read what I want into it. And like, that's not who we are. That's not what we did. I told this story a while ago. Well, you weren't here. It was back in the day, the Tea Party used to do Constitution classes. They'd like normal people get together and read the Constitution and get like freaking nerds. And it was awesome.
It was pretty awesome.
Those same people are now being like, oh, well, it's kind of vague. It's just like,
I read it. It's kind of vague.
Yeah, right? And all that time it was, this means something. This is who we're supposed to be. So, and then lastly, one part of that too, is like, this is typically something along the lines is AOC now in charge of our foreign policy, because if we give Congress in charge of it, who knows what Congress is going to do? Well, yeah, but that means any president's in charge of our foreign policy too. Would you rather have one person or a diffused body have to debate it if you're going to war? Like, if people are saying the anxiety over Iraq was just that it was forever. And I'm like, no. The anxiety on Iraq was forever, and it was costly. It cost thousands of American lives. And it was done on a lie. They lied us into it. And there was actually an authorization to use force for it. You know what I mean? And like, they could have, if you're going to do it now. If Iran was such an imminent threat, do it now. Right?
Do you think it could pass? Do you think it would pass?
Yeah. And you could structure an authorization. Well, yeah, they failed to do a war powers resolution. They tried to pass a war powers resolution to say like, the war powers resolution was to say we should vote on whether or not we want to do this. It wasn't even the vote on whether or not we're going to do this or not. And it failed in the House and the Senate. So why not go do it?
If the war powers resolution failed, doesn't that mean the use of military force would fail?
No, that means it would succeed, because it was a vote to not take the vote on whether or not we should go to war with Iran.
I guess I'm a little bit confused by the procedural piece of this.
Yeah, it
probably
was like,
other people are too.
Yeah, so imagine like you're okay. I got it. Okay, so your girlfriend is upset at you, but you don't know why.
Okay,
and so you sit down and say, "Hey, can we talk about this?" And she's like, "I'm busy." That's what Congress did. They said, "I'm busy. I don't want to talk about it right now."
Not right now.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
good analogy.
I get that.
Yeah,
you kind of like, she's mad.
Yeah.
And she's so mad, she's just not even going to talk about it.
Yeah.
We're so sure we're going to war. We're doing this war. We're all going to vote for it. We're like, why would we waste our time actually voting to vote on the war?
And that gives them the slippery movement of being able to get out of having to actually defend the war.
Right. Which I think is the biggest, that's the biggest travesty here, is none of these people actually have to go back out and talk to their constituents and defend their decision.
Right. And this is often sometimes paired with this idea that's, oh, well, we'll lose our strategic advantage. And I get that. I don't want to see military members die.
Why would that compromise the strategic advantage? Because they can't move as quickly?
Yeah.
Or because Iran will see it coming?
Can't surprise them as much. Does anyone think Iran was that surprised, though? I mean, we did strike them a year ago in the middle of negotiations. Do you think Iran was really... Do you think that the Ayatollah was that surprised when he died? Do you think he didn't kind of want to die as a martyr, given everything? We've been talking about the guy having cancer for like 20 years. He was 84 years old. Now, did he want to die right there where all of his children and grandchildren also died? No. But, you know, I think odds are they weren't that surprised. And I think the way things have played out is it appears that they were ready for this condition.
Well, clearly. I mean, it seems like they've been pretty adept at defending themselves, minus casualties and things like that, which are expected.
And I was talking to a veteran buddy of mine, and I admire him so much, and I really respect him. And he said, you know, in a similar vein, we were discussing this about war powers and Congress. And he was like, look, even if you lose some strategic advantage, we used to be a country that kind of had a little bit more honor than this, you know, and had a little bit more integrity. If we were going to go to war, we'd say, let's go outside first, you know, step outside and not mess up the place. And what I don't mean by that is like walking into a field and standing in a line and shooting at each other. What I mean is we would declare war and then go to war, you know, and that declaration might lose some strategic advantages, but at least it keeps our integrity a bit.
For sure.
And we're still a republic then. And that's kind of important to me. If we're willing to sacrifice soldiers to guarantee the future of Israel in their regional ambitions, because I don't want Israel to go away. I don't want them to be wiped off the map. I just want them to find peace like everybody else. If we're willing to sacrifice our young men for that, why wouldn't we be willing to sacrifice our young men potentially for our own honor and dignity as a country, to be a republic again? Isn't that what our grandfathers and great-grandfathers fought for? That seems like that to me anyways. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, guys were lining up to go fight.
Yeah.
And now you've got reports of, unconfirmed, soldiers smoking weed so that they pop on a drug test and get, you know, discharged or, you know, whatever that mechanism is.
Yeah.
And potentially, and I don't know if there's any truth to this, but there's allegations that the fire on the Ford, the aircraft carrier, may have been started by soldiers to get off of this deployment, which is now going on close to the longest deployment of any ship in U.S. military history, as far as I know.
Wow.
So different dynamic. Whether those things are true or not, it does feel different, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, like if we're debating it and all of our leaders are coming together to accept it, does that give a bigger mandate? Well, it seems like it would, right? And like, how are we treating our soldiers by having them go in this condition, in these conditions, with such a divided country? That can't be good for morale. So
it's not good for the country.
Yeah,
it's not good for the soldiers. It's not good for the country.
Yeah. But I mean, and here I'd like to hear from you. If you are a veteran or a spouse of a veteran, would it be worth it, right? To lose the element of surprise, but to gain a little bit of our country's integrity back when it comes to these questions.
Yeah.
Right.
How are things going? Moving to the present here and out of the the casus belli conversation. Where are we at, and what can we expect in the next days and weeks?
Yeah. So, what can we expect in the next days and weeks? Iran is holding on, right? I think it's going to be a longer war than this. When looking at like the time horizon, how long is it going to go? At the end of the day, we're requesting a $200 billion defense additional on top of the $1 trillion defense budget request for 2026. I remember when we were discussing this, so when that first happened, I was like, maybe we're going to war in 2026. You know?
Yeah. Wasn't it already close to $1 trillion and they were requesting 1.5 or something like that? It was a lot more, wasn't it? I could be getting those numbers wrong, but I feel like it's even higher than $1 trillion.
Yeah, no, I think it was. No, we were less than $1 trillion, but we were going to break $1 trillion, and like that,
Right.
Donald Trump made a big deal of that. So now it's going to be at 1.2, and that's on top of what we're already spending. So, so this is to give you a sense that $200 billion, that's more than all we spent on Ukraine so far, which is $1.75 billion. It's worth about 1 year of fighting in the GWAT.
Wait, 1.75 or 175?
175.
Okay, yeah.
Apologies. Okay. Yeah, sorry. It's about 1 year of fighting in the GWAT, right? So think about like 2006, that era. 1 year of fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq, we're going to spend on Iran to replenish all of the missiles that we've done and everything else.
But you have to think, given inflation, would probably not cover a year worth of war fighting, especially according to the numbers that we just saw in terms of the spend that's currently going on.
Yeah, the current burn rate, it's about 6 to 8 months, right? But to put that $200 billion in another context, if you took that $200 billion, and I know this is a liberal fantasy, but just to put it into context, and if you just paid for the meals of the poorest 1% of Americans, that would pay for their 3 meals a day for 18 years. That's the scale of the amount of money we're talking about. Now, we already do that. It's called Medicaid. But I'm just laying it out like this is real money, and we're going to spend it all on the war in Iran.
Wow.
Yep. So there's other signals for longer war, right? So we have a 30-day waiver for Russian oil buys. Why 30 days? Yeah, that seems a little bit longer than that time. And that was last week, so suggest a longer time horizon. We have a 60-day hold on the Jones Act. The Jones Act is a bill that says only American ships can ship between American ports. So we're going to suspend that to hopefully get cheaper shipping over 60 days. Will that work or not? I don't know. But a lot of people have been asking for a repeal of this Jones Act for a long time because it does raise shipping costs for a lot of Americans. But unfortunately, we're only going to get a 60-day waiver. But that does indicate, is the war going to be 60 more days? You know, that sort of question.
Well, I mean, it could be alluding to the fact that the economic impacts of this war, however long it is, may outlast and take longer to subside than the war itself, right?
Maybe. There's also like the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, both domestically and internationally, is set to pretty much roll out over 4 months by the amount of oil that they're releasing.
It's projected to run out?
No, to roll out.
Oh, okay.
Like the amount that they've said, okay, we got this whole chunk, we're going to release this much, and it's going to roll out over this period of time. Because they don't just dump the whole market, right? Because that would crush the price.
No, it would.
Yep. And then lastly, like the other signal that this war isn't over with is that every single day, Iran hits something. I mean, they're still alive. They're still fighting back. So you have all the typical, call out of consequences of that is that we're now in an escalatory back and forth. What do we do with that?
Yeah. Where does it stand? Where is the war at right now?
So, well, it's hard to say. The fog of war is difficult. So like, for example, the typical response is we have devastated their launchers. You get the typical 80,000 or 80% down on launchers or 90% down, 7,000 targets and all these typical numbers. And if you listen to the DOW, Department of War, they will typically say, we've been devastating all their stuff, their Navy, all that, right? But I want to note that those are tactics, not strategy. And in fact, it's the same error that LBJ did, right? This is the body count or McNamara fallacy. It's we killed this many Viet Cong, that means we're winning. But that only works if you're in two armies on a battlefield shooting at each other until one gives up. That's not what's happening in this case. We are invading another country that is very familiar and has watched us get involved in several asymmetric warfare or situations very recently in Iraq and Afghanistan. So how have they prepared over the last 30 years with the potential war with America, as we've saber-rattled them over and over again? Us, even more so Israel, as we've done that over and over again. Well, they built up a ton of ballistic missiles, a ton of drones, a ton of water, like tiny water boats, like suicide boats, and like sub-water boats, like a little, what am I looking for? Submarine boats, submarines that are like drones. and they've hidden them in the mountains, and they're rolling them out, and they're shooting, and they're trying to hide them before we can spot them. How long can they do that for? Well, the trick is if you're doing asymmetric warfare, you don't have to do a lot. You just have to do enough. You just have to persist long enough and continue to resupply.
Sure. It's sort of death by 1,000 paper cuts kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the same error that George Bush did. When we technically defeated Iraq in the tactics, we still lost in the strategy. Right now, Iraq is could be falling into civil war. I don't know. There's a lot of questions, but we have major militias fighting happening in Iraq right now.
Wow.
You know, did we get what we wanted out of Iraq? No, it's hard to say that we did. But it's fundamentally the same era, and it took a long road to get there, a long occupation to get there, even in the best of light of putting Iraq into a light as it currently sits. So it's important to understand that it wasn't just the tactics that got us there. It's also the underlying strategy. Now, I want to highlight this for everybody is because I talked about it a little while ago. Robert Pape wrote the book Dying to Win. And in that book, he says, look, you know, we occupied Iraq, and that puts us right in front of all their suicide bombers. That's why we get all these roadside bombs and all these things, because we're right in the way. So what we need to do is strategically offshore. We need to be at a distance where they can't touch us, because the underlying motive of all suicide terrorism is I am in a country that has been dominated by a foreign power, so technologically advanced I cannot possibly contend with it. So I will deal with it by suicide bombing, right? He advocates that the drone war in Iran, Obama completely pivots to drone warfare and all of his shenanigans in the GWAT. At that point, after we get out of Afghanistan and everything else, we've really pivoted to the strategic offshoring. But then he wrote a book called Bombing to Win. And in that book, I haven't read it yet, but I've been reading a Substack, which summarizes a lot of it. And I'm going to get to it. I can only read so fast, guys. I'm doing research too. Is in that book, he articulates what I understand is the escalation trap that major powers get into when they're in this situation, which is that the tactics work in the beginning if you bomb a bad guy, but you can't change the regime that way. No regime has ever been changed that way. So then how do we get to the place where we change the regime? Well, now we need ground troops. First up. Second up, and there's another question that no one seems to be asking, what do we do with the nuclear material? How are we going to get it out of the country? Because right now, it might have gotten picked up at Fordo or getting unburied between Operation Midnight Hammer and Operation Epic Fury. So if they got it out of there, where is it? Do we know where it is? We don't have the JCPOA or even the IAEA inspections between those two periods because, well, they quit letting them in because we bombed them mid-negotiations. So once we find out where the nuke material is, how are we going to get it out? That's going to require ground troops. You can't bomb uranium out of the country. So what I fail to see how this doesn't persist, at least in as long as the Strait of Hormuz is locked up in tic-tac little tiny pricks that allow them to do that. Now they might say we have air superiority. What's his name was just the Secretary of War was out there saying that today, and Obama and Trump was out there saying it today. But remember that we had air superiority in Iraq War 1, 2, and 3, and in Syria, and in Libya, and in Vietnam. And it didn't matter in terms of strategic outcomes. It only mattered in terms of tactics. So strategy and tactics. We have to grapple with that.
Doesn't really seem like this administration has, or at least they have not communicated clearly, a strategy for this war.
Yeah, I mean, I think the strategy has been, okay, this is the hard thing. Okay, your tactics are what you do. Your strategy is what you're trying to achieve.
Right.
And that's a political outcome. And the only strategy they've said as a political outcome is Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, they can't have a ballistic missile program, and they can't have proxy forces. How do you get rid of that? Well, you have to kill all the proxy forces. You have to get the nuclear material out of the country. Otherwise, they can build a dirty bomb.
Not just the material, but the technology that they've used to create it. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't completely eliminate that capability, then they'll just do it again.
And DNI Gabbard did say today or yesterday that we did destroy all, according to the best intelligence that they have, that we did destroy all the facilities. But did we destroy the knowledge of how to build those facilities and update them? That's a different question. So what time horizon are we talking about? And then how do you get how do you get the material out there? Do you kill enough people to do that? Do you need to control the government in order to keep it from rising again?
Yeah.
And once you're at regime change, you can't do it with this question. So the next one is Strait of Hormuz, right? So, and that's like, if they close the Strait of Hormuz, they can't, right? Because if they do, the Strait of Hormuz will hurt them as much as it hurts anyone else. But that's not what we've seen so far. What we've seen so far is the Strait of Hormuz is closed to their enemies and open to them. So China is able to get through. India is able to get through because they have pre-existing oil deals with Iran. India has kind of fallen in and out. Like, we've been able to bully them out of it. We've never been able to bully China out of their oil deal. And we don't interdict their shipping. Why? Because if we interdict their shipping, oil prices will crater. That means 20% of the world's oil is gone.
Oh, so oil prices will explode.
Yeah, because China is going to start buying oil from everywhere else to make up for the difference. Yeah. So therefore, the oil prices go up.
Yeah.
So what we did is we took sanctions off of Russian oil, and then we're allowing Iranian oil tankers through, but all these other 300-something oil tankers are jammed up. So Qatar and the UAE and all those guys are all completely jammed up and unable to move their oil tankers out.
What a clusterfuck.
Because Iran can tell the difference between its oil tankers and other oil tankers. So what that does is it gives them bidding power. It allows them to say, hey, Qatar, you want to make a deal? Kick the Americans out and sell your oil in Ruan. How long can the Qatar hold on when it's the entire economy's wrapped up in this?
It's a really good question.
Do we attack Qatar then?
Right.
What do we do when that happens?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But we might have put them in that circumstance. I don't know.
How could the administration not have wargamed this out?
Well, it has been. Yeah, I mean, that's another one. Pape teaches at the War College, and he's taught strategic bombing campaigns in the past. And he says every year they wargame this out. And every year it winds up with the same thing, which is that they control the Strait of Hormuz simply through asymmetric warfare because it's just that tight. The strait is, I mean, it's hard to imagine. It's so narrow at some junctures that it only requires just sending a drone over once a while. And all of a sudden, all those shipping companies are like, sorry, not going to go there.
Well, they can't get insured.
Yeah, and there have been like government programs to supposedly work that out, but even that's really expensive. Are we going to use American taxpayers to back all of that? Well, then we're just begging Iran to bankrupt us by not sending one or two, but by being very consistent in how they send them.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that's the thing. The government can try to backstop insurance, but it doesn't stop Iran from blowing up a couple of tankers to the point where the shipping companies decide they're just not going to risk it.
Mm-hmm. So very, very technically, in that sense, because another thing he said, and once again, check out Robert Pape. For 30 years, the goal of American foreign policy is to prevent Iran from controlling the Strait of Hormuz. And now they do. So is Iran more powerful now than they were before the war? That's a valid question. Because now they have causes belli. They have the just cause to wage war against the world, against the American empire, and punish everybody. And we really can't complain that much, right? I mean, like the world isn't going to hold them to that great of account because this is existential for them. They don't have much to lose because we backed them into a corner. Okay, so the possible end states. All right, the first is Iran is the ideal, right? Is what Israel has been going for, apparently, according to a lot of people inside the administration, which is Iranian regime change. That's why they cut off the head of the snake, not realizing that it was actually a much more decentralized government than maybe they thought, because the government seems to still be working because they seem to still be attacking us.
But they're sort of maybe not considering the fact that the IRGC is split up into these sort of semi-autonomous groups. So it's not just cutting off one head of one snake. It's like a hydra. Mm-hmm. You cut one off, that's great, but there's still however many more.
Then you got 1 million people out of 92 million. Can you continue to recruit and replace people? Well, yeah. Now, how many people do you have to kill in order to actually get to that space of regime change? And can you do that without ground troops? Once you have ground troops, because no regime has ever been changed without ground troops. The best case that it has been is Japan. And we had to firebomb several cities and drop 2 nuclear weapons. And are you willing, Donald Trump, to be the president to do that? Second to that, Japan knew we were already capable of invading islands and taking islands from them. This was at the very end of the war after we chipped away and backed them into their corner. And lastly, if, as Donald Trump said on Truth Social, which is, I'm not sure how formal it is or if it counts, but that this non-war can only be resolved by unconditional surrender, a technical term that says you literally have to let your government go, and we're going to, and we can now do anything we want to your people. You have to complete submission, roll over, show your belly. That's what they supposedly the end state is. Can you do that without a legitimate threat of naval invasion, ground troop invasion? And second, can you do that can you get the nuclear material out without mass casualties, right? Because if you get the nuclear material out, you have to send in special forces. Sending in special forces, we're knocking out launchers and drone launching sites. That doesn't mean they don't have an army, right? Or mechanicals or anything like that hidden in and I don't know how much these are propaganda videos and how much they're maybe AI or drifted out of scale or whatever. But Iran knows that we have satellites. And they have mountains to hide things inside, caves and tunnels and underground bases. So how much remains? We don't know what our denominator is there, right? So every time they say 80%, that's that we think we know what their actual launchers are, and this is how many we've destroyed, so that gives us 80%. But we don't know what that is. So they could be just, according to, in Dropsite News did an interview with one of the leaders of the Iranian regime as it currently sits, and they said, well, what about a ground invasion? It's like, we're waiting for you. Right. Now, that could be bluster, but we've only killed about 1,000 people. How many was it again? 2,000 people. Just under, I forget.
You said like 1,400, I think, and then that site there that we looked at the top of the show said 5.
Yeah. So anywhere in there, that's a lot less than 1 million. Right. So, and this is not Venezuela. And not only that, I think it's probably a little complicated to move nuclear material around. Might take a little bit more than a guy in a briefcase. What we're talking about is a lot of nuclear material that funds several nuclear reactors and a bunch of 60% nuclear fission material specifically to negotiate away in negotiations. That isn't the kind of stuff that you can just put in a paper bag and take it out, So I'm really worried about how many logical ends of the stated regime change and or minimal intervention stuff leads to people on the ground having to take stuff out or take people out. So that's the ideal, and I think we're well short of it because or at least it's a long ways away.
Yeah. What else are you seeing for the States?
Civil war, right? So the next one is like the Syria model, which I've been talking about, which is where you use covert operations in order to stir a civil war, and that's been signaled very clearly by everybody involved. The one after that is the ground invasion to secure the straits only, right? Because, okay, so get this. We don't get regime change with the tactical wins. They just keep shooting drones at us. So eventually, this economic pressure builds up. So then we go in and we invade in order to secure enough territory and wipe out all of the underground facilities or whatever so that they can't continuously send. What do they need to send? A drone a day?
Yeah.
Maybe a drone every other day?
Sure.
Right? So to give you a sense of the scale, Iran sent Russia 50,000 drones only a couple years ago. That's their production capacity. They have 92 million people, and they make very cheap drones on scale. So if they can just build 1 or 2 drones a week, you can shut down the Strait of Hormuz as long as you can launch them once a week.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you get there? Can you get there tactically? Can you disrupt that strategic aim with any amount of tactics that don't include a long-term ground occupation to find where they're doing these things and take out the production facilities? Oof. And then lastly, the next one of that is Houthi style, right? So you have the ground invasion to the Strait, you remove that, but then you have to overthrow the regime because now you're stuck there controlling half of Iran. And, there's still a regime there. So then you got to go overthrow the regime. And then it's an escalatory spiral. You spiral into doing more and more and more before you know you're LBJ and there's all these casualties, right? The next one is the Houthis, right? In Yemen, we bombed them for a decade, right? Is that what we're going to do? We're just going to sit here and let them control the Strait of Hormuz as we just bomb them for a decade? And then as we continue to do that, if something gets out of control, like it almost did, like it got really close to, Qatar had a major facility wiped out, LNG. by Iran after Israel attacked another key LNG Iranian producer. So that tit for tat, back and forth, escalates. Next thing you know, Qatar's got 15% of their potential production facility gone.
Jeez.
It'll take 3 to 5 years for Qatar to come back from that.
Wow.
Right? So my point here is, if we can avoid escalation and just stay here, how many people do we have to kill? How many hundreds of thousands potential people do we have to kill in order to do this? And are we willing to do that? That's crazy, right? How much money are we willing to spend? 200 billion, 400 billion? What are we going to spend? 10 years at $200 billion a year? Come on. That's an enormous amount of money. Can we afford that without going bankrupt? And if they start cutting these deals with these other countries, or are we going to like tank the oil price? Now, get this. If we go there and then all of a sudden the Houthis in the Strait of oh man, I always forget it. It's like a super Arabic word.
Yeah.
El Mirab Strait. And that's the strait that sits between the Horn of Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. Right there, the Houthis were, do you remember a couple of years ago? They were able to disrupt that. Just doing that reduced global GDP by 1%. And this was like late 23, 2024. And then it doubled to quadrupled the shipping cost to Europe doing that. And then it fell container traffic by 60 to 70%. Now, the oil spike was only 10% because they were able to go around the Horn of Africa and all that kind of stuff. Strait of Hormuz is way more contained. But you're still like, that's just another thing to add on top of all the other components. According to reporting today from the Wall Street Journal, the Houthis are just waiting to be told. So that's another part of that escalatory spiral. And how far can we go? Well, we've already gone as far as we want to go. We don't want to go to ground troops. They can go way further. They have all of these other steps they can still do because for us, this is weekend at Bernie's. For us, this is just, we're just doing another regime change, you know? For them, it's fight or die. So why wouldn't they escalate all the way to the end?
Yeah, the stakes are very different on each side. Absolutely.
So the next one is, and I've heard this a bunch, is, well, Trump will just leave. He'll just pull up. But the problem is that all of our troops are still there. We're going to remove all of our troops across the Middle East. There's no reason they don't shoot at us as we're leaving out the door. Then we have an Afghanistan situation again. Who knows what could happen out of that? Now, all of our neighbors and allies, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
So, and not to mention, are we ever going to stop defending Israel? Come on. So he's not going to do that. That's just unrealistic. And then lastly, and the most likely outcome is an inevitable deal between Iran and the U.S. And the question is just when. Is it going to happen soon or later? You know, and like if it happens soon, maybe he can recover a little bit of credibility with the broad public and everything else. He could cut a deal and say, I got to quadruple the expense. Like he could still do that if he can get the Iranians to accept. But the Iranians are going to extract a hide out of this, right? Because there's no reason for them not to.
Well, and so far, I feel like I've heard that they've been unwilling. If the allegations are true that the U.S. has reached out to try to make a deal, they've been unwilling to negotiate. Yeah,
there's been a lot of rumors, unconfirmed, and a lot of big back and forth. Like the U.S. has accused Iran of trying to reach out to make a deal, and Iran's accused the U.S. I don't know who to believe.
Yeah.
All I know is I just can't, and I want to be wrong. I want someone to come to me and be like, no, David, you don't understand. We have UAP technology that's going to win this war. You know, I want to know that, right? Because the last thing I want is American ground troops there. I just don't see a strategic pathway that doesn't wind up there. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, or we just kind of do the Houthi thing and we just spend ourselves into oblivion doing this, killing hundreds of thousands of people, creating a migrant crisis out of the 92, like it's much bigger than Syria, guys. 92 million potential migrants moving into Europe could be a real problem. And then, but if he does it sooner, then he can maybe recover by the time of the midterms and not have his entire government fall apart in terms of like governing coalition. That's his choices. If he waits, it only can get worse for him. If he does it now, he'll have to pay more up front, but in the long term, he could actually get some of the rest of his agenda across the line. But this could be the end of the Trump agenda this year.
I mean, I don't see how a guy like Trump, even as politically savvy as he may be, I don't see how, with an ego like he has, he can back down from this without a win, because he's a winner, not a loser. All that language, right? Like, how does he step back from this without taking it on the chin from a reputational standpoint in his own mind?
I kind of think of it like, do you remember when we renegotiated NAFTA?
No.
Yeah, it happened the first Trump administration, and it was like, we're going to renegotiate NAFTA, and it was just NAFTA again. There was not that big a difference. Like, it was a pretty small renegotiation, but it was like, woo! Like with the champagne bottles, and it was like, it was some very marginal changes.
Yeah.
You could see Trump come out and be like, I fixed it. I fixed Iran. Let's talk about, healthcare now. And we go that way.
News cycle moves and the war's over and it's fine. It's just 2 weeks and no one remembers.
The trick is being willing to bear the cost Iran's going to put on it. It's going to be no more sanctions. It's going to be, a tariff regime that benefits them. It's going to be, they're going to go all out. There's no reason for them not to, right? Because we've overextended with this, potentially. And I want to know if you got another idea or something I missed, throw it in there. I'll be in the comments section. And if there's like an argument for the war that we missed, please let me know, and I'll see if I could do to give you my thoughts. So
sounds great. David, thank you so much for that really thoughtful episode. That was very interesting.
Cool.
A lot of things I wasn't thinking about or considering prior to this episode. So hopefully it was helpful for you as well. If you liked the show, you made it all the way to the end, the Discord is definitely for you. The link is in the description, so definitely jump in there and continue the conversation. Before you go, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Most of you guys are not, even though you do watch the show on a regular basis. We see you. We appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you for your support. On behalf of David Rand, my name is Joe Sheehan, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you want to become a member and support the show financially, check out humanreactionpod.com. And remember,
Gaddafi died at the end of a bayonet to his butthole. So, hate,
that will end up on the stream deck.